I've said in several videos that to be human is to open to life eternal. That all life is a kind of life eternal, and that humanity is the place of nature that can self-reflexively open to that fact. Now, many people have haggled with me and said, "Oh, what do you mean by eternal?" Okay? And they've suggested there really is no such thing as eternal. And so this is where, again, this sort of Hillary Putnam moment comes in, where I'm not sure what it is what concept of eternal they're using in order to show that mine is bogus. So we can start with this whole, you know, does the eternal mean bad infinity? No, I don't think that's what we mean. I think it does have to do with a kind of a non-temporality to human experience. Now, I think there are some different ways to come at it. One of the most interesting aspects of human life is that each one of us, every person, they emerge into the world literally out of another person, and it's as if the universe began with their birth. Now, they know that it didn't, or at least they slowly come to realize that it didn't. But there is an initial sense in which it's like you've never known anything but your own life. I mean, your life is all that you've ever known. And even when you try to imagine what was before you were born and what will go on after you're dead, you can do that, but only as you're alive right here, right now, in your imagination. A different way to say it is that I don't think the dead ever have to worry about death. Only the living know of death, and to that extent, death is a hoax. There is no death. That is, the death that could be known of is the way the living deal with death. But to that extent, it's really not death. That death is the one thing that the living are not. And the dead, as dead, never have to deal with non-life. Now, I think what people want to say then, well, okay, where's the eternality? Well, I've tried to say it a couple of times. One is that logos, or speech, is a kind of eternality in that it allows for essences, for eidetic realities, and for possibilities. Speech and language are part of a room-making nothingness. I've said so much about nothingness in some of my videos that there is a kind of nothingness that makes room in language, and language is part, I guess, of the way that the universe opens itself to eternity. Not only can I, with language, taste eternity because there are words that don't decay and aren't subject to entropy properly. That is, we do have to address the difference between information, which is negentropic, and materiality, which is subject to entropy. So there's not only the sort of taste of eternality in every word all the way along, but as a language speaker, I can open to all that ever was. Now, if I want to say all that ever was, and say that that's what I mean by eternality, well, we don't really want to come at it that way, but we can get at this sort of ultimate notion of what we mean when we say that life itself has to be eternal. Now, someone will say to me, I think, that no, life isn't eternal, and the argument goes something like this, that there was a non-period that wasn't any time at all under which there was a nothing. Okay, you can't even say any of that. But then somehow inorganic material, hydrogen, appeared, and slowly, by some process, life emerged. And so it's wrong to say that life is eternal. Okay. The question would be, how will you know that life wasn't already nascently precast in the inorganic? And you can say, well, we know that the inorganic is not alive. Okay. Even if I grant that, Okay, let's just grant that for argument's sake. What does it mean, though, to say that once life has emerged, it now can open to what was the necessary precondition of itself? So, that is, if life makes possible for a place and moment of itself, that's us, and we're able to recognize our own roots in the inorganic, that is, if I can see myself as partly related not only to the Big Bang, but related to the nothingness that preceded the Big Bang, if I can do that through language, isn't it only in language and in life that that's possible? I mean, isn't it only in life that life in its eternality can recover itself and humans itself in that case? Now, I know all of that sounds ridiculously paradoxical. It sounds like a solipsism. But in another sense, it's like that's the only way that the universe could open to itself. It's not as if the inorganic world, you could say that that's not life eternal, but life eternal is a concept that's made possible by the living. Now, to all the people who want to say this is all linguistic magic and that what I'm doing is playing a sleight of hand and I'm confusing the issue, I am going to ask you right now, aren't you doing the same linguistic magic? Aren't you using words and concepts to show to me or in your head that there actually is a kind of eternality that isn't that, but somehow that's always you using language to somehow transcend the immediacy of the way an organism is installed in its immediate environment? Like right now, all of us, we are animals, we're a product of natural evolution, and we are installed in an environment, but somehow with our language, we can transcend immediate experience, it would seem, and we can, to such a point where we can actually think about such ultimates. And when someone tries to correct that ultimate and they say, no, 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 your eternity falls short, or technically that's not, they're still using resources made possible by language in life, to which what we're calling not life was actually a necessary, perhaps sufficient, but maybe not sufficient condition for life. And so, how technically are we defining it as not life? So I think we're introducing boundaries that are creating obstacles that end up creating this kind of paradox. There really isn't a paradox, maybe, if we come at it a different way and just say that we are the place and moment that emerged through which the life that is eternal could open to itself in its fullness. And I mean, life eternal has to include nothingness in itself. That is, when the nothingness blew into the something, the nothingness couldn't leave the nothingness behind. Somehow the nothingness is included in the something, and part of what we mean by the world or reality has to include, like the scientists, please come out here and tell us what percentage of the world is actually space, or what properly could be called nothing. I think it's about 90%, 99%. It's a ridiculous amount. But language is made in the image of the order that is the cosmos. Language, speech, information are negentropic forces, and in their negentropy, they open us to radical, radical spaces and times. And if you say, well, again, this kind of transcendence is a cheap stucco, what kind of transcendence would you need? What kind of eternality would you need in order to say, yeah, that is the real deal? I think that would just be a fantasy. What more would you want? What more could you need? Why does it seem like the universe came into existence with your birth? Why does it seem like it's going to completely disappear at your death? And what's the spiritual significance of learning to open to others in this life, recognizing that you're not perhaps as separate as you think? I mean, those are the sorts of issues that I'm trying to get at. Okay, thanks.